Hello there guys, welcome back to the channel and thanks for tuning in. There are some reasons why people may like to relocate abroad. Some people desire relocating for various reasons including employment, higher education and opening a new business. In the last video, I talked about the many benefits of living in Canada. In this video, I will talk about the top 20 cons of living in Canada. So let's start. Canada is cold. Well, Canada is very cold, at least in most parts in Canada. Winters are not simply cold, they are bone-chillingly freezing. In some regions, the temperature drops to -40°C. Here, winters are very chilly and severe, and they last for 8 months in the northern areas. Therefore, it might be challenging for newcomers to Canada from tropical climates to adjust to the country's extreme weather patterns. Although many believe that snow enhances the natural beauty, it will be tough to go out and appreciate the nature's beauty. Not only in winter, but even in the spring or late summer, the weather in Canada is highly unpredictable. You can leave your house in the morning when it's sunny and 30 degrees Celsius and come home in below freezing conditions. What is even more striking is that the temperature extremes in Canada covered a range of around 100 degrees with temperatures approaching 50°C in Lytton, a village 260 km northwest of Vancouver in British Columbia, with temperatures reaching below -40°C in some parts of Alberta. The country is one of the biggest in the world, second only to Russia. As big as it is, Canada is diverse. As a result, traveling by road between cities takes a very long time. Therefore, flying is the only practical method of traveling between major cities such as Vancouver and Toronto. For instance, it takes around 5 hours to travel from Toronto to Vancouver, and the tickets are quite costly. It's cheaper to fly to Europe than to many places within Canada. In addition, a significant portion of that enormous landmass consists of wilderness and rural regions. This calls for lengthy travel durations, often up to 5 hours or more, between densely populated locations and not always on broad, straight, easy-to-drive freeways. Yes, Canada is also home to a large number of enormous mountains and lakes. As a result, you could find yourself needing to travel far from your intended route in order to avoid a lake, river, or a mountain that stands in your way. Even more dispersed than the US, Canada has a large portion of just wild lands. Although the healthcare system is praised for providing free, basic and essential care, elective procedures and long-term care may have a lengthy waiting periods, particularly in large cities. The universal healthcare system in Canada only pays for medically essential services. This means that although you will be covered for operations, you will be responsible for paying the prescription eyewear out of the pocket. There is a 3-month waiting time before you can apply for your public health insurance card in Canada and use any free healthcare services. This is something that many foreigners to Canada are unaware of. Therefore, it's important to get a private health insurance for the first 3 months. Mobile plans are very expensive. It can be one of the most shocking things about Canada for tourists or people who just moved there. Let's get one thing straight. Mobile phone plans in Canada are notoriously among the most costly in the world, particularly when it comes to data. The cost of a mobile plan with 5 GB of data can range anywhere from $57 to $100 per month. In my case, I pay $56 for 4 GB of data for a month. If you compare this to India, this is ridiculously expensive. Even if you compare this with US or Europe, cell phone plans are much cheaper than in Canada. some cities are very expensive. One of the major drawbacks of living in Canada is the expenses of living, which is generally much greater despite variations across regions and provinces. This is mostly a result of Canada paying high import duties since many of its products are sent to the US first before being delivered to their ultimate location. Canada has a high cost of living when compared to many other nations. Even though they support universal health care, taxes are rather high and rents are sometimes quite expensive, particularly in larger cities like Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. As a consequence, consumer prices rise in order for businesses to continue turning a profit on the goods they offer. You will need a car unless you have a very restricted travel lifestyle and never go outside of your city, and you can't even rely on taking the bus in certain places. Sales tax isn't included in the price. The sales tax in Canada retailers is really shocking for those from Europe or India. Every time I make a purchase, I have to estimate how much I will really spend beforehand, because the price labels do not reflect the sales tax and hence the actual pricing. Each province have different values of sales tax. You never know the actual price. The price displayed in the product is not the actual price that you will be paying. For example, consider you want to purchase an iPhone 13 Pro. Apple website will advertise it to be $1399, but that is not the actual amount that you will be paying. The actual amount that you will be paying is $1566 in Vancouver, and this price will be different in different cities and provinces. But in India, the prices what is shown in Apple website is inclusive of all taxes and is the final price and is same across the entire country. Tipping rules in Canada can be difficult to understand for newcomers and tourists. Many individuals struggle to understand who they should tip appropriate amounts and what to do in the event of poor service. In Canada, the majority of service sectors expect tips. If you don't tip waitstaffs at restaurants, hotel staff, or hairdresser, you will be seen as disrespectful. Tipping percentages often vary from 15 to 30%. Typically, I leave a 15% tip, but if I am really satisfied with the service, I leave a 20% tip. On the negative side, tipping not only underestimates your spending, but also never gives you an accurate idea of what you are really paying. Therefore, if you are from Europe or Asia, you may find tipping culture difficult to adopt. Government control. Canada is undoubtedly a nation with a lot of government control. Many individuals believe that Canadian regulations are too burdensome and would prefer less restrictions and less interference from the government in their life. Most Canadians feel like their government regulations tend to be an overreach into the decision that they can make about their lives. If you don't mind these issues or think they are beneficial, then this disadvantage won't seem like much a problem. If you prefer to make your own choices, then this issue could be a definite setback when moving. The immigration procedure might be complex. While immigration in Canada is relatively easier compared to the US, as a result there are a large number of applicants. PR process happens through Express Entry program, which is based on point-based system, and each year they admit only a fixed number of immigrants. For skilled workers who can apply via Express Entry, things are a bit simpler, but obtaining a work visa will be difficult if you can't demonstrate how you could contribute to Canada's economy. Traveling from the United States is often much less expensive than from Canada. In fact, a lot of Canadians may discover that it is somewhat less expensive to go via the US than to attempt direct flights. If you often fly Canada can be much more costly since flights from the United States are typically less expensive. Also, for some strange reason, airfares between India and the United States are often significantly cheaper than flights between India and Canada, despite the fact that the flying times are quite comparable. Houses are very expensive. One of the biggest problems that Canadians currently face is the prices of housing and the lack of affordable options. Owning your own home is becoming increasingly difficult, especially in major cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. And to save money, many people continue living at home with their parents before renting, and they may be buying something way down the line. In comparison to many other countries, the cost of living in Canada is rather expensive. Even while taxes support universal health care, they are rather pricey, as are rents, particularly in larger cities like Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. Canadian dollars are undervalued. Canadian dollars exchange rate against the currencies of other wealthy nations has not been advantageous. As the current exchange rate with the US dollar, 1 Canadian dollars is equivalent to 0.77 US dollars. 1 Canadian dollar equals to 61 Indian rupees, which is much lower compared to 1 US dollars, which is like 80 Indian rupees, or 1 euro, which is like 81 Indian rupees. You will miss certain food. Simply, Canada lacks a wide selection of items. Canadians are used to fewer options and fewer things on their shelf, since everything must be transported on several long-haul trucks and there are logistical issues with delivery. Due to the severe winters in the majority of Canada, agriculture is constrained and most vegetables and fruits are imported from the United States or Mexico. Additionally, you will miss classic Indian street foods, which you will not find in Canada. It's hard to get a job as a foreigner. It is typical to obtain a great well-paying work within 6 to 9 months. When hiring, employer want to take their time to identify the best applicant. Although Canada's average income is higher than that of many other nations, there are still numerous low-wage employment available. Despite the fact that Canada's minimum wage is also greater, there aren't many occupations where earnings vary significantly. If you want to see your wage rise, you need to enter the tech, engineering, or other future-oriented fields of work. On the other hand, several occupations that have historically paid badly in the US, such as teaching, pay higher wages in Canada. Depending on your sector of employment, it might be difficult to acquire a job in Canada if you have no Canadian work experience. Some things become luxurious after relocating, such as renting a home or having enough money to dine out most nights of the week. If you are ready to invest time in settling in, living in Canada might be an excellent choice, but it might take many years to get there. Canada has two official languages, French and English. If you go across Quebec, you will encounter French pretty regularly and you should anticipate hearing it spoken in conversation. So this may just be relevant to Eastern Canada, but learning French could be necessary if you want to work in Ottawa or Quebec. Therefore, some employers may demand candidates for employment to be certified in both French and English. Even if you manage to pick up a language, there is still one more aspect of it that could be challenging. Canadian French might vary from French spoken in France. Quebec speaks a distinctive type of French, so even after learning a second language, you could still feel like a stranger. Canada does not recognize international credit. This is a significant deal. The majority of individuals move their credit history across nations. Other nations' credit histories are not accepted in Canada. This implies that you must start again while building your credit score after moving to Canada. However, if your credit history overseas isn't outstanding, this gives it a wonderful motivation to relocate to Canada. It is also critical to keep in mind that although your credit history overseas is not significant, your criminal past will be closely scrutinized by the banks and the immigration procedure. This shouldn't be much of a problem if you are young and haven't yet worked on building your credit history. Although it's good for society and ultimately makes life easier, but when coming from India, you may not like it. If you cross red light, fine will be as high as $300 or more. If you need something urgent, no matter what you do, it will take the time said. Also, Canada has some weird rules which you must be aware before you are relocating to Canada. Canada's industries aren't strong. Although many businesses are expanding in Canada, the best place to go for a really robust tech or oil and gas industry is probably the United States. Since disruption and innovations are not highly valued in Canada, many of its businesses may be characterized as being low risk and unimpressive. However, that same absence of risk is precisely what makes these businesses more predictable and dependable. In Canada, consumer goods are more expensive. Before being transported to Canada, many items are first sent to the United States. One of the main drawbacks of living in Canada is that many consumer or luxury products might be more costly since Canadian traffics, shipping and taxes can be more expensive than in the US. Restaurant timings. In India, practically everything is open until midnight in major cities, but in Canada, mostly restaurants are closed by 9:30 p.m. This might be a disadvantage if you sleep late. For example, in major cities in India, say Bangalore, several Starbucks remain open until 1 a.m. in the night, but in Vancouver, all the Starbucks are closed by 7 p.m. I hope you found this video informative. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.